pull out a $1 bill or, just picture it in your mind.
Right. Everyone knows that face.
Exactly. Look closely at George Washington's face there, because for, over 2 centuries, you and I have been taught that this tight-lipped, stern expression is just the ultimate look of stoicism.
Like an unbothered military genius, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just carrying the weight of a new republic. But if you actually look at the medical ledgers and the primary sources from the era, they tell a completely different story.
A vastly different story.
You aren't looking at quiet resolve at all. You are looking at a man in absolute agonizing physical pain.
Yeah, actively fighting a mechanical contraption, too.
Right. A contraption made of lead, animal teeth, and steel springs that is literally trying to force his jaw open.
It completely reframes everything we think we know about the man, doesn't it? I mean, we are so used to encountering our historical figures as these flawless marble statues.
Oh, absolutely.
We categorize them with simple, memorable trivia so they feel familiar. And we really rarely stop to consider the visceral, physical realities they were dealing with every single day.
Which brings us to today's custom deep dive for you, the listener. We are pulling apart this really fascinating source document titled The Myth and Metal of Washington's Teeth.
It's a great piece of historical analysis.
It really is. So our mission today is to unlearn one of the most famous childhood history lessons of all time. And we want to discover the complex, surprising, and sometimes, frankly, deeply uncomfortable truth behind a founding father's smile. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
I want to set the baseline right out of the gate here. The most famous fact that everyone thinks they know about the first president of the United States.
The wooden teeth.
Right, that his dentures were made of wood. It is completely, entirely false. I mean, based on the historical record from the source, 0 wood was ever involved.
None whatsoever. Wood is actually a terrible material for dentistry.
I can imagine, yeah.
It would just turn to mush and splinter in the moisture of a human mouth almost immediately. But shedding that myth isn't just about correcting a piece of trivia for you guys. It really forces us to examine how and why history gets sanitized over time.
Yeah, totally. So if we're throwing out the wood entirely, the first question that naturally comes to mind is, well, what exactly were people looking at that made them think wood in the first place?
Right, because nobody just pulled that concept out of thin air.
Exactly. There had to be some visual reason for the rumor.
And there was a very distinct visual reason. The primary material used for the base of his dentures, and often carved to look like the teeth themselves, was hippopotamus ivory.
Wait, hippo ivory?
Yeah, hippos have these massive, dense tusks, which, gave an 18th century dentist a large enough piece of material to actually carve out an entire upper or lower palate in one single go.
Wow.
And initially, when it's freshly carved, hippopotamus ivory is stark, brilliant white.
But ivory is heavily porous, right? Like, it's full of microscopic holes and ridges.
Precisely. It is essentially a sponge on a microscopic level. And you have to consider Washington's diet in the 1700s.
Oh, right.
He was constantly consuming dark port wines, heavy black teas, and tobacco. So over time, with constant daily use, that porous ivory just absorbed every single stain.
That makes total sense when you think about, like, an unglazed ceramic coffee mug.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Yeah, if you have a porous white mug and you leave it sitting on your desk unwashed for months.
Which we've all done.
Right, and you're just pouring dark roast coffee into it every day, those stains seep deep into the microfissures of the mug. And eventually, it completely alters the texture and the color.
Yeah.
It stops looking like ceramic and starts looking like a dark, grainy, entirely different substance.
And ivory has a natural grain to it, much like the rings of a tree.
Oh, I see.
So when the dark stains of the port wine and the tobacco seep into those natural lines, the hippopotamus tusk genuinely began to look exactly like a piece of carved, rotting wood. The physical reality of his diet literally colored the material.
Okay, so the visual completely explains the origin of the rumor. But I still find myself wondering why the wooden story became, like, the official accepted narrative for centuries.
Right.
It seems almost too folksy to just be a convenient misunderstanding,
Well, it is folksy, and that is exactly the point. Wood is simple. It's rustic.
Like the cherry tree myth.
Exactly like that. It perfectly aligns with the other carefully curated legends we've built around him, like the humble boy chopping down the cherry tree. Telling school children that the first president had wooden teeth just feels relatable and harmless.
Yeah, it's a very safe story.
It serves as a much more palatable explanation for the public than the highly complex and frankly gruesome reality of 18th century medical care.
Gruesome is an understatement. Because once we accept that the ivory was staining and degrading, we realize it wasn't holding up.
Not at all.
And that physical failure meant Washington was constantly searching for different, stronger materials. The source document lays out the actual inventory of what was going into his mouth over the decades, and well, it reads less like medical supplies and more like a catalog for a medieval blacksmith.
The sheer volume of material is just staggering.
Yeah.
Because his dental decay was a relentless, lifelong, chronic condition.
Right.
To put his struggle into perspective, by the time of his first presidential inauguration in 1789.
The exact moment he is stepping up to lead a brand new nation, right?
Yes. At that exact moment, he had exactly one natural tooth left in his head.
One natural tooth. That is wild. And to compensate for that over the years, the source says he went through at least 4 different sets of full dentures.
At least 4, yeah.
And the materials, we're talking animal teeth, specifically horse and cow teeth, embedded into bases made of heavy metals like brass, lead, and gold, all of it held together by a complex system of steel springs and bolts.
It sounds like a nightmare.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because calling this healthcare almost feels like a joke. A heavy lead plate filled with cow teeth and brass bolts sounds like a torturous steampunk mechanism.
Yeah, it really does.
It sounds like putting a tiny bear trap in your mouth.
The bear trap analogy is actually mechanically accurate. The key to understanding his daily agony lies in those steel springs you mentioned.
Oh, the springs, yeah.
18th century dentists didn't have the sophisticated suction techniques or dental adhesives we use today to keep dentures attached to the gums.
Right. No fixidant back then.
Exactly. So instead, they used coiled steel springs attached to the back of the upper and lower plates.
So the springs were there to push the plates apart, wedging them against the roof of the mouth and the bottom jaw, just to keep them from falling out.
Exactly. It's the exact opposite of what you might want. The natural resting state of those spring-loaded dentures was fully open.
Wow.
Meaning, in order to close his mouth, Washington had to actively use his jaw muscles to compress those steel springs.
He had to physically fight his own teeth every waking moment.
Every single moment.
Imagine having to do a continuous bicep curl, but with your jaw muscles, from the moment you wake up until you go to sleep, just to keep your lips together. The muscle fatigue alone would be blinding.
And that muscle fatigue was paired with severe tissue damage.
I bet.
The source is very explicit about the ongoing discomfort. You have heavy toxic lead bases and shifting animal teeth constantly rubbing against raw gums under the immense pressure of steel springs.
Just awful.
It caused chronic inflammation, pain, and actual facial distortion. The metal would chafe, the animal teeth would decay and smell horrific, and the springs would sometimes slip. It was an active mechanical struggle happening inside his face.
The horror of those materials is intense, but the failure of those animal teeth and metals drives the story toward an even more sobering historical reality.
It does.
Because cow teeth decay quickly and ivory stains, Washington grew desperate for materials that actually looked and functioned like human teeth. And the source document shows he didn't just rely on animals.
Right. This is where the narrative shifts from the mechanical to the deeply human.
Yeah.
The historical records confirm that among the materials used for his dentures were actual human teeth, and we know exactly where they came from.
The Mount Vernon ledgers. The source explicitly points out that Washington's own financial ledger books contain entries where he paid enslaved individuals for their teeth.
That's right.
And these were either used directly for his own dentures or supplied to his dentist, a man named Jean-Pierre Lemaitre, to be fitted into Washington's appliances.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it provides a crucial window into the socioeconomic realities of the 18th century. Now, to be clear, we are just imparting what the primary source states here.
Right, we aren't judging or endorsing, just looking at the documents.
Exactly. The source notes that the practice of purchasing teeth from the poor, including the enslaved, was an established market among the wealthy during this era. Live tooth transplants and the sourcing of human teeth for dentures was a recognized dental practice.
Wow.
However, recognizing it as a common economic reality of the time does not erase the fact that it profoundly alters our modern understanding of his story. It is a stark, undeniable fact recorded in cold ink in his own financial ledgers.
It is incredibly jarring. For you listening, think about the cognitive dissonance here. On one hand, we have the elementary school legend of a man with harmless wooden teeth who cannot tell a lie.
The sanitized version.
Right. And on the other hand, we have the primary source reality, a ledger book where the purchase of human body parts from enslaved individuals is recorded right alongside mundane expenses for farm equipment and seed.
It's a striking contrast.
It highlights this massive, uncomfortable chasm between the sanitized myths we create to protect our heroes and the complex, heavy realities of actual history. It totally shatters the glossy veneer.
It forces us to deal with the founder as a participant in the complex and uncomfortable systems of his time, rather than a mythological figure. And logistically, managing this horrific array of decaying human teeth, heavy lead, and tense steel springs required highly specialized constant intervention.
Absolutely.
Washington could not manage this mechanical nightmare alone.
Right, you don't just shove a spring-loaded brass and cow-tooth contraption into your mouth and call it a day.
No, you really don't.
You need a dedicated mechanic to keep the machine running. And for Washington, that mechanic was his personal dentist, John Greenwood.
John Greenwood is a fascinating figure in his own right, largely because he was a pioneer in early dental hygiene.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In the 1700s, the concept of dental hygiene was practically non-existent. Most dentists were just tooth pullers. But Greenwood actually focused on preserving materials.
How exactly do you preserve a lead plate full of decaying human and animal teeth? Like, what did hygiene even look like for this kind of hardware?
It involved incredibly tedious daily maintenance. Greenwood instructed Washington on how to remove the dentures and soak them in specific cleaning solutions.
Just to fight the smell, I'm guessing?
Exactly, to fight the horrific smell of rotting ivory and bone.
Yeah.
Greenwood himself would constantly have to file down the bases, adjust the tension of the springs, use beeswax to take new impressions of Washington's changing gum lines, and swap out teeth that had rotted completely away.
That sounds exhausting.
It was a relentless cycle of patching up a failing system.
Which naturally created a deeply intimate, unique doctor-patient dynamic over the decades. I mean, they were in the trenches together fighting this chronic battle.
They absolutely were.
And there is a specific detail in the source about the relationship that genuinely stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, the final tooth.
Yes. We mentioned earlier that Washington had exactly one natural tooth left at his inauguration. When that final tooth eventually had to be pulled, Washington didn't just throw it away, he gave it to Greenwood.
And Greenwood actually kept it as a keepsake.
Yes.
He had it encased in a special glass locket, a token of their long shared battle against his dental decay.
It is oddly touching, but also incredibly macabre.
Oh, very macabre.
Imagine a highly dedicated mechanic who has been patching up a failing classic car for decades, right? Desperately trying to keep it on the road using duct tape and spare parts.
Right, just holding it together.
And then when the engine finally gives out completely, the mechanic pulls the very loud and original spark plug out of the block and puts it on his shelf as a trophy.
The classic car analogy captures the exact spirit of it. It perfectly illustrates that Washington's dental health was not a one-time surgical fix.
Wow, it was a lifestyle.
It was a daily, agonizing regimen of maintenance, repair, and adjustment. The sheer amount of time Greenwood spent working on the hardware paints a vivid picture of a man dealing with a relentless physical burden behind closed doors.
But the reality is that physical burden didn't stay behind closed doors. The daily battle with pain and the literal spring-loaded mechanics of those dentures ended up shaping the face of the nation.
Quite literally.
I mean, literally, the face that is still hanging in museums and printed on our currency today.
The physical reality bled directly into the historical iconography.
So what does this all mean? Let's go back to that $1 bill I asked you to picture at the beginning of the deep dive. Or think of the famous Gilbert Stuart oil portraits.
The ones we all had in our history textbooks.
Exactly. Washington's lips are always tightly pressed together. They're pushed out slightly, bulging around the mouth, and his jaw looks rigid and locked. For centuries, art historians and teachers have told us that this expression was a deliberate posture.
The look of noble stoicism.
Right. A leader projecting strength and silent resolve.
Yet the medical ledgers completely recontextualize that expression. What's fascinating here is how a deeply personal, hidden physical ailment dictated a founding father's public image.
Yeah.
That tightly closed mouth wasn't a choice to look stoic. It was the direct result of the immense muscular effort required simply to keep his mouth closed against the tension of Greenwood's steel springs.
Oh, man.
The slight bulge of his lips was the lead in ivory physically pushing outward against his skin.
He was literally clenching his jaw just to keep his teeth from leaping out of his mouth.
That's the reality of it.
The irony is staggering. An expression of agonizing daily physical exertion and discomfort was misinterpreted by history as the ultimate symbol of strong, silent, unbothered leadership.
It brings us completely full circle to the underlying theme of the source document. The misinterpretation of the Stoic portrait, the persistence of the wooden teeth rumor, the avoidance of the Mount Vernon ledgers.
It all ties together.
It all reflects our societal desire to sanitize the past. We inherently prefer our founders to be flawless, painless marble monuments.
Yeah, it's easier that way.
Acknowledging the pain, the smell, the springs, and the human teeth forces us to view them as vulnerable human beings who struggled with basic physical realities and participated in the dark economies of their era.
It's so much easier to digest a fairy tale about a wooden carving than to confront the complex mechanics and heavy truths of a real human life.
Absolutely.
So to recap this journey we've been on together, we started by totally dismantling the myth of wood. We explored how porous hippopotamus ivory absorbed the stains of 18th century life to create that visual illusion. We looked at the terrifying mechanical physics of heavy metals and steel springs that forced his jaw open. We confronted the sobering ledger entries documenting the purchase of teeth from enslaved individuals.
And we saw how the constant maintenance by a pioneer dentist ultimately defined the famously rigid face staring back at us from the dollar bill. It perfectly demonstrates why it is so crucial for you to look past the sanitized grade school versions of history.
I couldn't agree more.
When we are willing to dig into the primary sources, the actual letters, dental records, and ledger books, we find nuanced, startling, and ultimately much more human truths hidden beneath the legends.
It makes history feel tangible. It makes the messy reality worth exploring. Which leaves me with one final thought for you to mull over as you go about your week.
Let's hear it.
We established early on that we like our history clean and categorized. But if a detail as physical, as highly visible, and as thoroughly documented as the first president's own face could be so completely sanitized into a harmless, folksy myth about wooden teeth.
It makes you wonder.
It really does. What other harmless historical legends about our famous figures might actually be hiding complex, uncomfortable, or medically fascinating realities just waiting to be unpacked?